Okay, Dent 1159, week 4. We're going to finish our setups from last week, the class 1 occlusion. What I've done prior to starting here is I soaked the models. It's been days now since I've done the last section of my setup, and I didn't finish it. So I want to soak the models because I want to reseal these wax ups and continue where I left off to the model. If I need to reestablish midline, I'll do so. And I'll double check that nothing's moved. I mean, I finished doing the anterior 12 with 1 millimeter overbite and 1 millimeter overjet, which is pretty minimum. And I want to make sure that you don't have any collisions in a protrusive movement, or even a slight left protrusive, slight right protrusive movement. So I'm just going to I have a little void here, so I'm going to wax up shortly anyways, so I'll make sure I reseal that on there. Make sure that there was no debris underneath the base plates, that they're sitting exactly as they were, which they should be. Yeah, nothing's changed here. Nothing should change, but nothing changed. And I'll just go through some excursive movements before I continue to finish setting up the posterior teeth. Now, many setup guides will say to finish the top 8 teeth and then, use some type of plate or plane, or I've seen CDs with little lines on them, putting the lower ridge on there and then setting up to the, central fossa of the lower ridge. But this year, we're going to do something different. The end result will be the same, and hopefully you'll get to the end result easier. And we know from Dentures 101 that the lower teeth must be on the ridge. There's no choice. The central fossa of the lower posterior teeth on the ridge, as well as the lower anteriors, and ours are just maybe slightly anterior to that. Let me see if I can get a better picture for us here. Something a little bit further up. Sorry about that. It's difficult for me to set up through the camera here. There we go. That's out of my way now. There we go. Oops. As I say it, it's not. Remark the midlines if they've fallen off. I've done my anterior 12 setup. Before I set up the posteriors, I want to double check that in excursive movements, don't unscrew these all the way, that there's no anterior collision. They just contact in a protrusive movement. They just touch. They don't trip. They don't collide. They don't bang. They don't come out of their setup. They're not tipping anything here. Little left to right, the canines are just touching and the anteriors are just touching. Left to right, just touching as well. I got a little hyperocclusion on the 2-3, but I'll probably just trim that with my articulator. Oh, excuse me, with my handpiece. Oh, it's a long day. We've noticed that in the elderly, as we age, our canines, we lose that youthful tip to the canine. The denture teeth have this, fang-type tip to the canine, and it's, the denture teeth are made for all ages and all situations. We need to kind of customize them. Usually a denture wear, unless they're a very young denture wear, then I would reduce the incisal edge of the canine. As you noticed mine, I've flattened it off here a little bit. So I'm just resealing everything down here. Now, I've drawn lines. They're just faint, but I'll redraw them on my lower model. We know that the plane of occlusion that we used and the dentist gave us was 2/3 retromolar pad. So I've marked that on the sides. And then I've marked the midlines on the lower. So you can start on either side you wish. But like I said, preparing the wax is half the battle in denture setup. So, I mean, I would use a number 7, some type of carver, or the other side of the number 7, and a small knife. And the alcohol torch. Now, after I'm done this, you can bring yours up live and we can critique them and see, give you the direction for what improvements that you can make. I mean, everyone's will be slightly different. We're not all, denture robots, but they all have to be functionally and technically correct. And then after that, we can depart slightly. These canines are making the turn. Now, those eye teeth, I'll probably end up changing them ever so slightly. Like 9 times out of 10, I'm always changing the eye teeth after the setup, just ever so slightly. And sometimes not. So I'm going to start with my first bicuspid. Sometimes if I've ordered a larger mold in the previous years, we've cut down a bicuspid to make it easier. Now, these are all going to be on a flat plane. Central groove all down the line. I'm sorry, my head keeps hitting the camera. Jesus. There we go. And I'll do this real time and then we can stop. I'm not vicariously putting them on as it looks like, hey, you just stuck them on the wax. I'm very close to where they're going to be. Now, the compensating curve, we're going to add into our setup, but we're going to do that at the end, where when you're setting up the uppers, you incorporate your compensating curve from the start, and then you're just guesstimating at 0.5 millimeter of the mesial buccal cusp of the upper 6, and then a full millimeter of the distal buccal cusp of the 6. Excuse me, 0.5 mil of the distal buccal cusp of the 6, a mil of the mesial buccal cusp of the 7, and 1.5 millimeters of the lower of the distal buccal cusp of the 7. I don't know what I'm saying, lower. And that's okay as an average for a 20-degree setup, but we're talking about condylar guidance here, and the condylar guidance for every client is different, and so our compensating curve will be different. Our vertical overlap will be different. Our degree of tooth may be different, depending on the ridge and the condylar guidance. And these are just slight variations. And the whole idea is that when the patient undergoes denture wearing experience, they're minimized of any type of trauma to the tissues, no excessive trauma to the tissues. So I've got 2/3 retromolar pad and a flat setup. You can use your setup plane. You can use it for one tooth, but I set them up a little bit higher. And then I'll just put this down exactly where I need it to go. I was a little bit high. I'm using the Colbeck plane. Developed this for our bite blocks. You can see 18 and 22 for the anterior bite block. For setups, straight line of these lingual cusps should all be in line. Depending on which tooth manufacturer, they have different philosophies. We have a Vita setup guide. The lingual cusps are all in a line. The central fossa is up to me to make sure that that's down, because we've got a stamp cusp, the upper mesiolingual cusp sitting in the fossas here, or the lingual cusp with the bicuspids, and we need to make sure that those forces of occlusion are directed down the long axis of the tooth, straight down to the tissue with no trauma. Down the ridge, central groove, right? We can use our ruler if we want to line up central groove. I'm very close here. Again, I'm doing all 4 at once. I've got the teeth in wax. The wax, I'll soften it up here again. And this facilitates me getting the teeth in one relationship. Because the teeth are in relationship to each other. They're not individual standalone units. They're not standalone units by themselves. It's difficult to set up one tooth in space without a relationship to another, or the ridge, or the model, or the anterior teeth. They have a relationship to each other. Try not to get any wax on the occlusion, please. I'm waxing up as I go a little bit because I know I'm going to have to carve this afterwards. Get any voids out of my wax. And if it drips down on my model, that's okay because I've already separated my model. I've soaked it in water for some period of time. 2/3 retromolar pad, central fossa down the line. Lingual cusps all in line. I'm looking from this angle. I'm looking from this angle. I'm looking from the buccal angle to see any line angles if they've adjusted. Now we can see that the cusp tip of number 4 doesn't seem to be synonymous with 4, 5, 6, and 7. I think the downside to this mold, or sometimes I've used that as a positive, is this buccal cusp tip has got that kind of, let's say, dome shape, or like the red square, or a mosque shape, dome shape. So I just want to take it off a bit. Now it matches 5, 6, and 7. Urban, who's the author of the book there, the booklet in front of you, from Vita, from Switzerland, or excuse me, from Germany, on the border there. He was a student here of ours, or of mine, in denturism, international denturism program, which existed many years ago. And he's a good friend of mine. I'd like to call him that. And he developed these teeth, these MFT molds, or even the Physioden molds, by hand. So he did the master molds, or was part creator. Whether it was all by hand or CAD, I'm not sure. But every time I see him, I said, you know, the buccal cusp on number 4 seems a little bit, you know, this big a wispy tip on it. And then he gives me some reason why they did that. And I think it's to fit more situations and creating a overbite in a class 2 with shallow lingual cusp or in partial dentures. Needless to say, I just, you know, took the tip off just as I did the canine. So I'm still working on this side. I'm looking from this angle. The lingual cusps are all in the same height. Buccal line angles. Central fossa. Everything on the plane, 2/3 retromolar pad, anterior teeth, posterior teeth. Now, be careful, just don't go on an angle because I'm missing the other side. And then if I work quickly, I can do both at the same time because the left side is still warm. Remember, the lower teeth have to be on the ridge. There's no creative freedom here. There's no freedom about arc and everything. So I can soften it up a bit. I'll soften this wax up. Sorry, I was off the screen. Let me zoom out a bit here. Sorry about that. It just keeps getting in my head. My eyeglasses hooked onto it. Simple problems, difficult solutions. So I'm preparing the wax nice and soft here. And then I'll start with number 4. Now, if you need to trim the tooth from hitting the base plate, go right ahead. I made enough room vertically on this first case for success again that you wouldn't have to be, burdened or saddled with trimming the teeth. Now, when I set them up, I'll just go a little bit higher than the plane of occlusion because it's going to sink into the wax, give me some freedom. Marginal ridges are together. The marginal. Now, I don't expect you to just slap them on that quickly, but I'm very close, as you can see. Marginal ridges of the teeth together, no diastemas. 2/3 retromolar pad on a flat plane with the anterior teeth and the posterior teeth on the other side. We just seal them to the base with the wax here. No wax on the occlusion. You can put wax on the base here. Reseal it if it's coming out. Make sure you get no bubbles. You're going to do some festooning and contouring not too long from now. And if you follow these procedures, you'll have success for working and balancing. I'm not doing it. The teeth are engineered to do them themselves, really. It's not a difficult thing. But if we're off from our anterior guidance, we'll be off here. If we're off on our plane, if all the teeth aren't on a flat plane, we'll be off. Now, other setup procedures, the lower anteriors will be last. But functionally in the posterior, the result is the same. So you may have gone upper 6, lower 6, upper 8. Upper 6, upper 8, lower 8, then lower 6. Here we're going to do upper 6, lower 6, anterior guidance. Lower 8 on the ridge, flat. No compensating curve to start. And then add on our upper 8. Check the working and balancing and protrusive. Minor adjustments. Wax up for try-in. And we'll move on to project number 2. I know we had an abbreviated finish, and I'm not sure how processing you got last year, but we'll pick it up this year. And then when you hit Mr. McCorman's class next semester, you'll be right up to speed. Not necessarily just in denture setups speed, but in speed with what's expected of you. And I'm giving you these, I wouldn't call them tips, but procedures for success. So you can experience success. The more success you experience, the more confidence you have. The more confidence you have, the more effective you are in taking risks moving forward. Confidence. Success breeds confidence. Confidence breeds success. What gives us confidence? Experience. What gives us experience? Repetition. And you are going to gain a little bit of that experience here at George Brown. Most of you can grasp as much as you wish. And then in the workplace is probably where I grasped myself more. I mean, we're limited in the amount of cases we have here at George Brown and the time and the space. So, middle of the ridge, central fauces. Am I on the screen? Jeez. Central fauces on the ridge, central fauces on the ridge, plane of occlusion, everything touching the plate, 2/3 retromolar pad, very close to it. Everything touching the plate, buccal and lingual cusp. Number 4, reduce the point just a touch. It just doesn't belong to the other line angles, buccal line angles. But these are, let's say, an entry-level tooth. Even with the expensive ones, you'll find that they have some anomalies to it. Everything is touching the plate. 6, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You want to check this section from behind. This tells a lot too. If you want to look this way from the throat out. I'm a little high on this side. Just a little above the 2/3 plane of occlusion here on this side. I didn't quite get it soft enough. I'll intrude them. Move them down just ever so slightly. And then now that I've pushed them off the ridge, I need to push them back. End up redoing this left side. Line angles. Take some wax out of there. It's just a little too much wax. Don't be afraid to remove the teeth over and over and over again. Now, we've got the 1, 2, 3. The canine will run into the cusp angle of number 4. You know, don't let it run into the lingual cusp, then your 4 sticking out. Don't let it run into the buccal out here, then this is lingual version. Just right in line with the number 4 of the buccal inclination of the buccal slope towards the central fossa. The buccal slope, number 4, which I'm still not satisfied with this one. Sorry for the delay, but I just wasn't happy. I'll reposition it. There's some asymmetry to the teeth. There we go. End up pushing my number 3 a little bit. Make sure I'm okay here. Yeah, I pushed it in too much. Bear with me for a second. Geez, I really soaked these like to fall off. I'm just tightening the condyles here. Bennett shifts at 15 still. Make sure that doesn't change. Condylar guidance is at 30. Make sure that doesn't change. Make sure my anterior 1 millimeter overbite over jet didn't change. Make sure my posterior teeth are still on the ridge. This number 5 seems to fall out a bit. Lift the buccal cusp of that 6, 7. Check again with your plane or anything flat. Make sure everything is flat on the plane all the way around. Looks like I was a little bit overzealous with the alcohol torch. And I lost position of these anteriors. I pushed them just a little. I got a little heavy on the hand. Be careful with that alcohol torch. There we go. Flat plane. Same overbite, same overjet. Now, before I put the posterior teeth on, I'm going to fine tune this number 5 again. How about that side? Number 7 can come up. In. Take some wax off there. It's a little too much. sometimes you end up being further away from where you were. But needless to say, that can happen. So now that I'm somewhat satisfied, I just thought my arch wasn't as symmetrical as it could have been. I'm going to reseal these teeth here. I've been messing around with them all the way around. And then I'm going to get this stabilized and then continue to set up the upper posterior 8. We can stop here and get our lowers checked before going any further, because if this is not correct, no sense going any further. You just end up taking them off again. So have someone have a peek at your lower 14 here. On the ridge, 2/3 retromolar pad, all the teeth touching the plane. We will be incorporating a compensating curve. Compensating curve for the curve of SPE that occurs in the natural dentition. And we'll be compensating for the condylar guidance. When that condyle comes down the anterior wall of the glenoid fossa, we don't want the teeth to have any eccentric contacts colliding in such a way. I'll end up resetting the front ones a little bit too. Just wasn't satisfied and then ended up changing everything again. That's okay. This corner here seems sharp. I don't know if it's that pencil line that's even, it's got a bit of a sharp end to it, but I think that's okay. Arch shape. Okay, so we've got everything on a flat plane. We've had it checked, very close to a flat plane. Things move continually. I'll prepare the top now. We'll do one side. Make sure the wax on the bottom is set and hard and the teeth aren't floating around all over the place. I'm going to reduce my occlusion rim. I'm going to use this occlusion rim. Some setup techniques are you keep the occlusion rim as the aesthetic control base, and then you create 2 occlusion rims, and one base plate for the setup and the other one for registrations. And I think mainstream dental laboratory is we're using the occlusion rim to do our setups. And that occlusion rim is contoured for labial lip support. Oh, great. There's some alcohol in there. Now these anterior teeth don't touch, okay? Like you would think in natural dentition they do. I've soaked my model ridiculous amounts so they just keep separating. I'm gonna seal it on here. Pretty good. And now we've got, this is not a lingualized occlusion where it's tooth-to-tooth relationship. This is a one-tooth to two-tooth relationship. So this number 4 here should fit right in between number 4 and 5 on the bottom. Now this may create a space distal of 3, as such I have. And that's why I said we go back and we adjust the canines to change the arc to hide this space, because there's only, let's say, 5 or 6 lower molds with, 20 upper molds or 25 upper molds at different diameters, or different widths of the 1x6. But I have this correct position here of number 4 between number 4 and 5 on the bottom. I'm not going to worry about that little space between 3 and 4. I'll go and I'll recontour my arch form and close that up. afterwards. Then number 5, between 5 and 6 on the bottom, with the right amount of posterior overjet. Okay, the lingual cusp is occluding. Number 6. Same amount of overjet, please, in the posterior region. And number 7. I'm going to seal these down, or add some wax. They're already in. Oops. Don't get any wax on the occlusion of the teeth. Check that the overjet, the buccal overjet, is the same. I'll fix this in a jiffy. I'm going to put some wax on the lingual. I'm going to wax this up soon, so I might as well add some wax now. Seal these teeth in good. Please. I'll do the other side. Remember, this is just going to work out well if those lower teeth are in the right position. Medium, midline down the ridge. Now, in your workplaces, you may see something different. In every denture setup course, you might approach this a little bit differently, but this, I think, is really basic. We're going to have it for success, and you may adopt this in every type of denture setup procedure. It's up to you, but I think this works well. So we'll start off with number 4. And it fits perfectly between 4 and 5. This side I don't have a space, probably because I was messing with that canine. Now it looks like they're hanging down a little bit, the 4s. But we're going to adjust that a little bit, because those tips on number 4 are a little bit long as well. Five. 6. Same overjet. Okay, it looks quick, but the upper posterior teeth are probably the easiest to set up to begin with. If the lowers, I spent more time fussing and getting them on the ridge and the right angles. I'll add some wax here, number 7. If I left a little bit of wax, it would have been easier, but I have to add some back. Oops, went through the other side. Same buccal overjet. Same buccal overjet as the other side. With some experience, you decide how tight of an occlusion you're going to want. But I'm going to show you here with the working and balancing. Once I finish my anterior guidance, once I finish my anterior guidance here, with my space here on the left side, then I'll go through the excursive movements. So this canine here on the left side, I'm just going to turn the corner a little sharper with it, on the patient's left that is. I'll turn the corner and reduce the overjet because I had a lot of it and I didn't have enough overbite. And I'll come in here a little tighter. And you can see the space is now almost somewhat 100% eliminated. This is the same side I was messing with on the bottom. Close. Now, I also did those 12 on an articulator at the building on dockside and then transferred to another one. So there's always slight differences. I'll see this when I transfer it back to the articulator, but I'll probably have to make some small adjustments depending if, the articulators are calibrated or beat up a little bit, but very close. And then I'm just going to do the curve of SPI, and then we'll be done. Let me just get this wax on here a little thicker, a little neater. I don't need this. I'm pretty close, I think. Not 100%, but pretty close. I'm going to change this back here too. But if you remember from last year, if you didn't, the posterior setup, when you did the upper 8, you had 4, and then you had 5, and then you had 6. I'm making an exaggerated denture occlusion, whatever. And that you had these, central groove. This is the uppers. You had these cusps down the lower line, and then these 3 were in this line, and these 3 were in this line here. So distal 7, mesial, distal 6. Come on now. Something like this. And you can see here that we have the same thing going on, except we did it with the lowers. So I have those 3 in line, and then these 3 in line. Oop, I just made it in line. Let's double check here. I didn't change it. Yeah, I had room. These 3, those 3. 4, 5, mesial buccal of 6, distal buccal of 6, and 7s together. And I've shoved those 7s in. I'm going to change them now with the curve. I'm going to have to fix around here this canine that I moved around. I'm not exactly 100%. But I can fix that. I think the lateral is what's throwing me off. Maybe it's a little up off the plane. It looks a little bit raised. Yeah, that's a huge amount of the lateral. I'm going to change that one too. and bring it down to the plane of occlusion just a little bit more. It was a little too much off the plane. Tiny, 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 tiny space here. But like I said, the upper molds, there's 20 of them, if not 30 of them, if not 40 of them in some manufacturers, versus the 5 to 10 lower molds for dimension. So there's always slight discrepancies, some more than others. There we go. I'm back into the anteriors here again now. Okay, I'm going to fine-tune this very shortly. So, once I have everything in place, release your condylar guidance, and the first position I take is straight protrusive. I got to go slowly here, I don't want to rush. Can I get my articulator to loosen up on that side? Okay, good. So protrusive is straight back. So when I look at the side here and I go protrusive, you can see the space here. I got my anterior teeth touching. Canine should touch tip to tip of 4, 5, 6, and 7. But this is compensating curve, Christensen's phenomenon. There is no contact in the posterior. One thing I can do to help myself is I may reduce the buccal line angle of number 4 and reduce this buccal line angle of number 4 as I did the lowers. And we'll check again. So let me get a pencil so we know what we're looking at here. I'm looking at this buccal cusp tip touches with this one. That these blue lines will match up. So I go in a protrusive movement and it's very close. As you can see, 3, there's a little space. 6, there's a space, and 7. 4 and 5 are touching where my thumb is. Should we zoom in? Now this is the balanced occlusion or group function where all the teeth are in contact. Now, some denture setup courses, they say, well, if you have one contact in each quadrant, that's fine. But I like to see them all. Anterior is touching, edge to edge. 3 would be touching lower 4. 4 touching lower 5. These are cusp tips. 5 touching mesial of 6. 6 and 7 are not touching. And this is compensating curve. How much compensating curve? That much. That space you see. So what I will do is I'll proceed now. And I'll do one side to facilitate the time. Distal of 6 is up, and 7. I'm guesstimating how much? Half a mil to 3/4 of a mil. So really, the flat plane now exists to the mesial buccal of 6. Distal buccal 6 and 7 is off the plane on an angle compensating curve for curve of SPE upwards, giving us some posterior protrusive contact when the patient goes mandible forward. Now, that means number 6 and number 7 here, I have to intrude because they would be hitting and colliding way too heavy now that I've lifted the lowers up. Now, people are saying, well, you just put them there. Well, it wasn't a big deal. We just put them back. Now, with experience, I might just build in the lowers and lift distal of 6 and 7 off the plane and use my flat plane, this Kolbeck plane, just to the mesial buccal of 6s on the lower. But, education purposes, I want to show you this Christensen's phenomenon that the posteriors will disclude on a flat plane. And now on an inclined plane, if you can see here, this has got my compensating curve slightly. They've reset in wax now. And now when I go in protrusive, lo and behold, 6 is touching, 4 is touching, 7 is touching the tips. These are buccal tips straight back. 3 is almost touching if I go back here, and this will be enough for fine adjustment. It's so close. Now, that's protrusive movement with the compensating curve on one side. I'll do the same to the other side. It all has to work synonymous in the group function. Let me seal this here a little bit so it doesn't move. Again, that's protrusive movement straight back. I'm going to check that. Like, not necessarily directly straight back, but very close to just straight back, protrusive movement of the mandible. That we have anterior contacts. We have posterior buccal tip against buccal tip all the way with compensating curve. As you can see, I've closed them all up now. We have to zoom up. Oh, shaky, shaky. So when I go protrusive movement, slowly now, I have all the buccal cusp tips touching, as well as the anterior. Number 3 is not. Maybe I could have left the buccal cusp tip of number 4, but maybe I can drop this slightly without making a Dracula fang out of it. And there you have it, it's touching. But I need to look at the aesthetics here. Then I'm just slightly below the plane, but very close. There we go. 3 touching 4, 5 touching, upper 3 touching lower 4, buccal cusp tip. 4 touching lower 5, 5 upper touching lower 6, upper 6 touching 7, and obviously the 7 is off the plane. This is straight back, group function, protrusive movements. The teeth are synonymous with the condylar guidance of 30 degrees. There were the buccal. There's no collisions. There's no, maybe a little bit here at the front that will fine adjust. If we were to draw it here, condylar guidance, and we've got these buccal line angles of 7 and 6, that this angle here of the teeth, whether it's 18, 20, or 22, I'll do number 5 here. I'm not even on the screen here. Number 5, these buccal line angles where where this goes in protrusive are gentle, and then here's our condylar guidance. It's all synonymous. So sometimes we have to lower the cusp angle, not cusp to fossa, but buccal line angles of the denture teeth. If we've got a little bit of a contact here, we'll flatten these out just slightly, so it's a smoother protrusive movement. So that's number 1, protrusive. Number 2, and I'm just going to do 2 sides. We have a working movement, which all the teeth are in contact one direction. Let's concentrate on balancing here. So when I move the mandible to the left, the lingual cusps of the upper touch the buccal cusps of the lower. And here I have all of them. Now I do. Lingual cusps of the upper touch the buccal cusps of the lower as I have an anterior stop. When one side is balancing, the other side is working, meaning this is very simple. These teeth are going right between the marginal ridge grooves, and there's no eccentric contacts. Now, I haven't done the compensating curve on this side. I'm concentrating on this for your illustrative purposes here. So, lingual cusps of the upper, that's this number 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Forget the distal buccal. It's pretty tough, those little ones. But they're in contact too. That they will contact up here. You can even see even the blue has come off here. Maybe we can use some articulating paper and try to illustrate that. So I'm going to put this in a balancing position, and I'll try to mark those cusp tips in the balancing position, which I would do chair side, even after processing slightly, but chair side the most of it. I can get very close on the articulator, and then chair side do the rest. So you can see the lingual cusps now are in blue. And I had this side down here in red. Didn't mark up too good because I think I got the pencil on it. We'll do protrusive movements. Anterior, let me move that over. Protrusive movements should be red on the bottom. You can see the buccal cusp tips, and you can see the contacts and protrusive all the way around. Anterior, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7's a little light in protrusive because when I go protrusive, there is no contact. It goes up to the retromolar pad. So, protrusive movements, tip to tip. Balancing contacts, lingual cusp to buccal cusp tip. Number 4 is very, very close. Number upper 4 to the buccal of 5. Very close. I got a little click here, which I'll fix when I do the compensating curve on this side. When I do the compensating curve on this side. You can even see down the line, this side's up higher here that I've adjusted. So, a little hetchy-sketchy, quick. Hopefully you got a piece of it. If not, we're going to repeat it. And we're going to do this with class 2 occlusion, class 3 end-to-end, lingualized occlusion, balancing contacts. Protrusive, I think, is most important. Patient always moves forward to bite and then bring the food back. Okay? So the patient comes forward to bite in the front, so you need edge-to-edge contact, and then they bring it back, and then they have circular movements to chew. In a class 2, especially, that sometimes they can come prognathic 10 millimeters to bite and then chew. Then we'll wax and festoon this up. Okay? Thanks.